Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have with us Bibek, Debroy, member Niti Aayog, and more importantly Chairman of a Railway Restructuring Committee, which recently gave its final report. Many far-reaching recommendations which if implemented would go a long way towards improving the productivity of railways, and indeed the Railway Minister has said that from railways alone India could get an extra 2% addition to its GDP in the next 5 years. So to discuss that and other issues, we have Mr. Debroy with us. Welcome to our show, Mr. Bibek Debroy. So tell us about some of the key recommendations that that your committee has come up with, which have generally been welcomed by a lot of people, including the media and other commentators. And at least two key elements that strike me as very critical are that you asked for an independent regulator to foster competition in this whole segment within the railways, and you also asked for a complete restructuring of the management of the railways, the revamp of railway board and the way the railway would be run in future. So give us some more details on what exactly are you trying to attack?
Attack may not be the best word.
Okay.
So I will react to your first statement. But before that, let me say that a lot of people, unfortunately, have been reacting, have been attacking, have been commenting without having read the report. So I would advise everyone to read the report. If you have taken the trouble to write the report, people should take the trouble to read the report.
Sure.
The report builds on 5 pillars. 3 of those are pillars that are being suggested by the committee. 2 of those are pillars that already exist in terms of government policy. We have only argued that they need to be strengthened. The 3 pillars that we are talking about, I'll come to the other 2 in a moment. The 3 pillars that we are talking about is, 1, a transition to commercial accounting. Today the railway system is such that you cannot figure out what costs actually are, what the rate of return is, and this is not being done only for the purpose of attracting private investments. Even for the railways, for public investments, it's important to know what the rate of return is. So this
income expenditure statement doesn't tell you how the details of how railway accounting system works, right?
Yes, well, there are all kinds of details. Let's skip over that. The costing is not very transparent. So the first building block is this. The second building block is a breaking down of silos. By silos, I mean standard complaint about the railways is it works in departments, and the reason it happens is because entry happens through multiple channels. So we have recommended a single entry, unified completely, and we have said that please do it immediately with respect to future entrants, that is prospective. And so far as retrospective problems are concerned, which are always problematic, don't hold up the prospective because of the retrospective. And the third one, as you said, is we have said an independent regulator, which we want to be completely independent. Therefore we want it to be set up statutorily rather than through the executive route. The 2 building blocks, which are existing building blocks, they are already part of policy. We have just wanted them to be strengthened, and we have pointed out constraints that exist in those. The first is private entry, and the second one is decentralization. So both of these we have suggested ways of making them stronger and removing some of the constraints that remain.
So in terms of hierarchy of implementation, according to you, which one should be addressed first, not attacked? Okay.
I don't think there is a hierarchy at all, because we've got
you simultaneously go on.
No, we've got a clear timeline which is spelled out in the report. That clear timeline in the report differentiates between the first 5 years and what happens after the first 5 years. And so far as the first 5 years are concerned, there is no hierarchy at all, because these things go in unison. And when I said that, let me take the example of the silos. I drew the distinction between the prospective and the retrospective. The prospective is very much part of the first 5 years. The retrospective can wait for the after the first 5 years.
Can you explain prospective? How will it work out with some example? Yeah.
No, example means what? You see, today, if you leave out the medical, there are about 7 different avenues through which people can join at the officer level in the railways.
Okay.
And they continue to follow these streams upwards vertically throughout their careers. Consequently, they do not move from one to another. They protect their own turf, and the only way to break this is to unify the entry.
So you mean freight is one silo, engineering is that what you're talking about?
No, it's much more than that, because there is more than one engineering service.
Okay.
It's not that there is one engineering service. There are several engineering services, there is an account service. That's why I said there are 7 different services, separate
Which
services.
are not talking to each other at the moment.
No, they won't. They simply won't, because the from the entry level right up to vertical movement upwards, the railways are structured in these silos.
So you are essentially talking about a whole HR overhaul, right? HR management overhaul, right?
My personal belief is that any organization that is embarking on a process of reforms, you need to fix the HR and you need to fix the accounting. If you do not fix the HR and if you do not fix the accounting, you will never get reforms in any organization.
Yeah, HR and accounting are really 2 critical pieces.
So people who talk about the railways, ignoring HR and accounts, will not be able to change the railways at all.
That's where the railways, the board revamp also comes in, right? It's part of the HR, right?
Well, in a way, it's related to part of the HR, but it's a little bit more than that, because what we have essentially said, it's linked more to the regulator part of it. What we have essentially said is, in the decision-making structure, there should be 3 different entities, and their role should be cleanly separated. The first entity, of course, is the Ministry of Railways. The Ministry of Railways formulates policy for the welfare of the entire country, policy for the welfare of the entire railway system, not only the Indian Railways. By Indian Railways, I mean IR, which is the public sector provider.
Sure.
Because it's perfectly possible that there may be private players too. So the Ministry of Railways formulates the policy for all of the railway system. Secondly, and it sets out the rule for competition. Secondly, you have the independent regulator, and that independent regulator ensures that there is a level playing field in terms of competition across these different entities. And this independent regulator is also saddled with the task of not tariff setting. I'll respond to tariff setting in a minute. Of computing social costs and compensating that social cost to whichever operator we are talking about, which may be IR also. Quite often, commentators have said that you guys don't understand that the railways perform a social function. They haven't simply read the report. Of course, we appreciate that the railways performs a social function. We have only said that you make it cleanly reimburse the railways or the private operator for the social obligations.
Separate the social costs from commercial costs.
So we've got the independent regulator. Now, so far as the freight part is concerned, our perception is that the freight market is completely developed. So the freight market is ready for market determined tariffs. So far as the passenger side is concerned, we have said that the regulator recommends, but those recommendations are not binding.
Okay, they're not binding. Okay. Now, when you talk about competition between segments, which segments are you talking about? Like, can you give us some examples for the benefit of our viewers?
Competition everywhere. Competition everywhere. Even today, people do not realize that private freight trains are allowed. Private passenger trains are allowed. People, responsible and irresponsible media people have said, Debroy committee recommends private passenger trains. For God's sake, please be aware that private passenger trains are part of policy today. Catering services are delivered by the private sector. Security in some places is delivered by the private sector. So competition and choice is available in across the board.
Across the board, yeah. So essentially what you are suggesting is that the ownership will be public, but in the functions, there could be parts of railways which could be run privately, which is the case even now. Is that what you're saying?
No. In the interim report and in the final report,
catering services is privately run.
We took great pains to say that we are not using the word privatization because
that is clear.
the word privatization is used in two completely different senses. We are not recommending sales of equity.
Absolutely.
We are recommending private entry, which is completely different from diluting equity.
In certain functions,
Most of these functions, private entry is already permitted. It's already there. It's not as if it's not there. Who do you think serves the food on most of these trains? It's not the Indian Railways. Who do you think takes care of housekeeping? Who do you think cleans the tracks? It's already the private sector.
So essentially you're saying it's a bit like subcontracting other PSUs also do, which are 100% government owned. Coal India does, there are other, ONGC does, it does sort of depend on private players for certain services which it uses.
It depends on what we are talking about. It depends entirely on what we are talking about. For example, if the DRM of a division wants to employ private security agencies, why should we constrain him? Because after all, one of the things that we are trying to do in all of this, and this is implicit, but implicitly it's very important, is to make all the divisions function as independent cost and revenue centers. That does not mean we expect all of them to make profits. They won't. Understandably, they won't. But all the divisions and all the zones, they will, of Indian Railways, they will become independent revenue and cost centers.
Which means at a future date, maybe railway police force, that could also be, if a division so desires, they can have private security instead of railway police force. Is that my understanding correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What we have said is even today in Pune, you will find that some of the RPF's functions, RPF has many functions. Some of the functions in Pune railway station, they have been given to a private security agency already. All we are saying is empower the DRMs and the GMs so that they have the freedom to choose. Why do approvals have to come to Rail Bhavan? Decentralize.
That's where that's where the HR revamp kicks in, right? To empower these people. And to have
all of that is true, but again what people do not seem to realize is in the 1950s the Indian railway system was much more decentralized. Over the last 30-40 years it's become excessively centralized. Today if I were to ask you as a passenger, do you think that the station superintendent has any powers over the station? The answer is no, he doesn't.
This is interesting that you're saying in the 50s things were different. We'll come back to this, but after a small break. Please don't go away and keep watching RSTV. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are talking to Dr. Bibek Debroy, member Niti Ayog, who's also chairman of Committee on Restructuring of Railways. So, Bibek, you were talking about certain critical pieces. Now, I'm happy that you said that railways used to be far more decentralized in the 50s. So we need to have a more decentralized system of functioning for the railways. Now, could you just simply explain to us the management structure that exists today, a very centralized management structure as you said, and how your report suggests broadly they can be decentralized for better productivity, for more efficiency here?
Well, this will take a very long time to answer. I would recommend that anyone interested actually reads the report. But for example, today the railways are divided into zones and divisions. There are several powers that the DRMs who are in charge of the divisions used to have in the 1950s. Those permissions have progressively gone. So the divisional managers have to write to the GMs who is in charge of the zone. The GM has to get the approval from the railway board. So over a period of time, in a creeping kind of way, this has happened. If you go back to the 50s, you'll find that the driver of an engine of a locomotive had much more control over what would happen with the locomotive than an engine driver does today. You would find it for a station master, you would find it for a train superintendent.
Or a station superintendent.
Station superintendent today ostensibly it exists, but actually it doesn't exist. The station master, and when I mention this, people are very surprised, the station master has no powers except commercial powers, full stop. You ask the station master to get the toilet in the station cleaned, he has no powers, he or she has no powers. Those powers have to go upwards.
Okay, okay. So tell me, in the next 5 years,
Yep.
if I'm assuming that the recommendations of your report are accepted and implemented. Now, what change will we see at the end of 5 years in the context of Mr. Suresh Prabhu's big plan to also massively modernize railways and spend about 8.5 lakh crore, which is huge in the next 5 years. Never has railways proposed to spend such a huge amount in such a short period. So,
well, I think the first thing that needs to be appreciated is that the railways are in the mess that they are in because of things that have happened over 55 decades. If the problem has been created over 5 decades, then no one should expect an overnight waving of a magic wand which will solve problems overnight. That's not going to happen. It's just not possible. So therefore, if one is looking for quick fixes, don't expect it.
but the scaling up of this 8.5 lakh crore is a budget.
Wait a minute, I'm not talking about that.
Yeah.
If you say independent regulator, people like you in the media, not you personally, have criticized it. Why does it take 3 years to set up a regulator? We have actually been criticized by the pink papers because we said 3 years. Again, people don't read the report. We have said 3 years because we want it to be statutory. The moment it is legislation that is passed through Parliament, it takes 3 years. That's the reason 3 years is there.
So you give a realistic timeline.
So in the next 5 years, what's going to happen? Well, firstly, commercial accounting, you can't do it for the entire railway system at one go. So what will presumably happen is you will do it on a pilot basis for a division, perhaps for a zone. That itself will take 2 years. So what's going to happen in the next 5 years? Precious little. But what you are doing in the next 5 years is putting in place the little bits of jigsaw that will enable the big jump, the big change in the period following the first 5 years. For example, to take one example, today I don't even know how much, as I said earlier, what the rate of return for a railway project is. So forget private investments being attracted. Today I don't even know what the rate of return is on safety measures, as opposed to, let us say, eliminating level crossings.
Okay. So you basically are trying to introduce clarity on these issues, separating commercial activities from social.
So if anyone expects that in the next 5 years, because of this report, there will be bullet trains traveling at 350 kilometers per hour across all the metros, it's not going to happen. It's not supposed to happen.
Sure. Anyway, bullet train in any case will take 15 years. So that nobody expects bullet trains. So tell me how do you think the present railway employees, about, I don't know, 15 million of them?
13.
13, yeah. So how have they received some of these ideas? Have they been communicated well to the larger employee, to the employees of the railways? Because one of the critical aspects of some of these rational reforms or changes is really communication. So where does railway stand on that?
Well, not the railways. You are asking how do we as a committee stand on that, not on the railways, as we as a committee.
If the management accepts your recommendation, they'll have to communicate it to them.
No, there is a long list of people we have met, and yes, there have been several committees on the railways, but I challenge anyone to establish to me that there is any other committee which has travelled to so many zones, so many divisions, and met so many out of these railway employees that you are talking about.
So you have gone around and met.
Yes, there is I presume you have read the interim report. There was a list in the interim report also, and there is a fairly long list in the final report also.
Sure.
So actually you shouldn't ask me the question. The reason I am saying this...
No, I'm talking after the final report. Yeah, so what is the response after the final report?
After the final report, or between the interim and the final report?
No, I'm saying your final report came some time ago.
Let me finish the answer to the question. this report has not been concocted in Delhi.
Yeah.
This report has not even been concocted by the members of the committee.
Sure.
Most of the suggestions, perhaps all the suggestions in the reports, both reports, they have come from railway employees themselves.
Okay.
We have just put them into a structure.
So it's a bottom-up report you're saying, yeah.
So therefore, there is no question about it not being acceptable to railway employees. These are their ideas, and again, do understand that if there is any report, it's unreasonable to expect Venu to agree with 100% of what I have written,
Sure.
or for me to agree with 100% of what you have written. But if a person agrees with 75 to 80%, I think we've got consensus, and 75 to 80% consensus you will get.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was asking this because in the last few days, I did read some reports quoting unions making some disagreeable noises. So I was wondering whether, what is it that the unions, which parts are they not agreeing with? I'm sure they agree with a lot of your recommendations, because you
Well,
just
that question will have to be answered by the unions,
Unions, yeah.
but I find the media also disagreeing.
Okay.
And-
On what?
Well, the media disagreeing on what it depends on the media. Media depends on which media you're talking about. But the media disagreeing on the one I mentioned, for example, earlier about why did we say 3 years for the regulator. Media disagreeing on the so-called dilution.
Okay.
So to my advice to everyone is please read the report.
Okay.
In the course of the interim report, who used the word privatization? Media did.
Okay.
The damage to the cause of railway reforms, I'm sorry to say, has not been caused by the unions, but has been caused by media.
Sometimes I feel that you attribute too much power to the media. Media.
No, I don't.
Media doesn't have that kind of power.
No, it doesn't. But it should have the responsibility which it doesn't. I know of a newspaper which commented on the interim report even before the interim report was in the public domain and had been submitted.
Okay.
So I have no problems with people discussing the railways. I have now come to realize that the railways are a bit like cricket in the sense that everyone knows how to solve the problems of the railways.
How to run the railways.
But what I advocate to all friends in the media, nothing personal about this, is before commenting, please read the final report.
Yeah. Tell me, in reforms, you know, we've been talking about reforms for the last 20 years in several segments, critical sectors. Railways, of course, one of them. Now, I've personally seen that there has been political economy resistance at various points. These are sensitive points, and railway is a very sensitive point. Now I'm happy that your report gives very realistic timelines. Like you say that things won't happen overnight; they'll take 3 years, 4 years. Now, so that's why I asked you, what will you do in the next, say, 2 or 3 years to sort of kick off the reforms process? I know regulator will take 3 years, but what are the small things that you could do in the next 2 or 3 years?
We or the railways? You see,
I'm talking about railways, yeah.
again, let me mention this.
I mean the railways, management. Yeah.
In my living memory, this is the first time a committee has worked in close consultation with the railway minister, with the railway board, with the employees and with the unions. So this is not a report that was written somewhere else.
It's not a top-down report.
So therefore, that interaction has already happened. The reason I'm saying this is, therefore, there is no political economy. The political economy has already happened.
It's already happened.
It has already happened.
You're fairly certain about that?
I'm not fairly certain, I'm certain about that. I'm removing the word fairly. So therefore...
I'll tell you why I'm saying this, because in the past, there have been big reforms where consultations have happened, but somehow after announcing the
we are talking
measures,
at the moment you are talking about the railways.
What I fear is that what has happened in other sectors should not happen here. So That's my apprehension. Yeah.
No, but your apprehension is unwarranted. To take one example of that, let's take the example of the Rakesh Mohan committee report, which is the one that everyone cites.
Yeah.
Was there any consultation before that report was written, before the final report was prepared? The answer is no. When were the unions first consulted? When there was a presentation made in Baroda, when Nitish Kumar was the railway minister.
It was president
Before that, there were no consultations. So all I'm pointing out to you is that factually, in the recent past at least, none of these committees have had these consultations, which we have had.
So thank you very much, Dr. Bibek Debroy, and hoping that having done consultations at all levels, your recommendations are accepted and they fly over the next 5 to 10 years, as you say, and all the best. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. Thanks for watching.